Welcome to CyberCast. I'm your host, Ross John Fortuné. Brigadier General Maurizio Calabrese is the Director of Intelligence and Information for North American Aerospace Defense Command, also known as NORAD, and United States Northern Command. He joins me now to talk about cyber warfare and his work. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Ross. Thanks for having me on here. Really glad we were able to make this happen.
So how has the role of defense intelligence evolved more recently in the last few years, particularly in light of cyber warfare, terrorism, things like that really bubbling up?
Yeah, I think the role of defense intelligence has never been more important. I mean, it's always been important, from the Cold War on, but as these new emerging technologies have come out, and especially cyber warfare, and then when you can put those technologies in the hands of really not just states, governments, state-sponsored terrorists, things like that, the average everyday criminal or person can have these weapons. You as defense intelligence, you have to now be able to discern across the entire globe multiple threats coming from multiple vectors, and not necessarily from a country. It could just be, somebody who wants to get online and do something nefarious. It's become much more complex. And so that role, and I think what's expected of us in defense intelligence, is to be able to provide those insights to our decision makers and our leaders so they have time and space to make those decisions, depending on what those threats are. And of course, here at NORAD and Northcom, we're all about homeland defense. And so number one for us is defending the homeland. And to do that, we need domain awareness across all domains. And cyber is just one of those.
Well, to that end, how do you sort of keep it locked up? How do you make sure you thwart everything away, keep the ramparts up?
Well, I always tell everybody it's a team sport and it's 24/7. It never stops. And by team sport, I mean not just between us and our Canadian binational command here, but really all the combatant commands and the services, the interagency partners that we have, especially in the homeland. As you know, domestically, we cannot do anything here without the FBI, DHS, others who have the authorities. And then around the world, our partners and allies. And so the way we look at threats from NORAD and Northcom is we have a global view that then narrows in, if you will, into the homeland. So globally, we're always paying attention to what's happening in the world. Is there escalation that could reach us back here? Because as I said before, pretty much, there are weapons and non-kinetic means, cyber means that people can reach out and touch the homeland now from anywhere in the world. So first we start globally working with, my partner J2s across the combatant commands to understand what's going on the ground. Is there anything happening there that could come back here? And then we start talking about the approaches to the homeland, if you will. That's my friends down in Southcom, things come from South America. And whether it's coming across the Atlantic or the Pacific, working with Indo-PACOM, working with EUCOM, we really have great partnerships, and we could not do that. And then once we get here into the homeland, of course, as I said before, it's working with our law enforcement partners, wherever we have to, if that's federal, state, local, tribal, it's just making sure that we are able to talk to the right agencies to get us that information, if they're willing to share, of course. And it's like I said, never ending, but we absolutely could not do it without our partners and allies helping us with that domain awareness.
I want to grab on that thread a little bit more because I know I've talked with some intel folks and some folks in other parts of the intelligence world, the national security world, that the proverbial bad guys don't necessarily differentiate between public sector, private sector, the DIB, those kinds of things. So can you talk about partnerships with industry and with DIB and how that informs your work?
Yeah, so we have a great, I think, relationship with the DHS, really Department of Homeland Security, and under that, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, under Director Jenny Sterling. I know her and my boss, Jerome Guillot, they talk often. And we also have a good relationship, he does, with the FEMA director, because if something does happen here, part of that is how do you respond? And so you kind of have both ends of that. So with CISA, we have that industry, I would say, partnership where we're getting to see, that through their work with industry and us partnering with CISA on that is getting those insights that only industry can get, because you're absolutely right, Ross. The adversaries these days, they don't care. They don't say, well, we're only going after the U.S. military. We're only going after this. They don't have necessarily the same rule of law that we abide by, inside our own country. They make their own rules, and by their rules that they don't distinguish, right? And the way they look at it is, well, if your industry is helping U.S. defense, then you're a target. If your industry is developing something in the future that might help U.S. defense, you're a target, right? So we see those actors wanting to both take intellectual property for their own uses to advance their own defense systems or weapon systems. And then we also see them, of course, trying to get into our critical infrastructure in this country so that they have an ability to reach out and touch us. Whether that's going to be a destructive attack or not, it absolutely could be. And so, again, without CISA, without DHS, without those partners, DOE, the energy sector, we're all in this together. And I think that the more we can express that to the nation, we really do need a whole of nation approach to defending the homeland, right? It can't just be a whole of government. I mean, that's hard enough. But we have to have a whole nation because we're all Americans one way or the other, and we all have a part of this. And so part of that's education on our part to let folks know, like, hey, the homeland is not a sanctuary. It's not going to be like if there's a high-end conflict, it's not going to be like anything you've ever seen before, nothing like I've seen before, truly. But I absolutely do believe like the homeland would be a target, whether that's through cyber means, but our adversaries are developing capabilities. They can reach out and touch us with kinetic means and not just nuclear weapons, right? Conventional weapons. And then other folks who can come into the country and use, tools that they have at hand, like small UASs and other uncrewed systems. So there's all kinds of just ways that I think if we end up in a high-end conflict at some point, every American is just going to have to realize, hey, we have to keep a lookout and we have to partner across industry, academia, and you name it to make sure that we're safe.
Yeah, the team sport aspect, I know, is something that cannot be emphasized enough because it is a whole of the country more generally. You've talked a lot about the different ways that not just the big name adversaries, Iran, China, Russia, things like that North Korea, that everyone kind of knows, but there are a lot of small people. Anybody now with technology has the tools. So let's talk about those tools: artificial intelligence, quantum, ML. How is that being used at Northcom and NORAD, and how are you seeing it on the other side? How are the bad guys using it?
Sure. First, I'll start with the good guys, on our side with AI and ML, and especially in the intelligence career field. We have the ability across multiple agencies, multiple partners to bring in vast amounts of data, right? I mean, from all over the world, and probably much more data than we could ever, well, certainly more than any human could ever go through in a lifetime, just on a daily basis. So part of this is you have to have tools that can help you bring out and what's important about that data quickly. And AI/ML is key to that. Being able to basically put in front of the human's eyes the data that's the most important, that can then be maybe further synthesized and then provided to a decision maker to give them time and space. This is all part of that domain awareness. You extend domain awareness in some ways by just being able to make sense of the data, right? So sense making is a key part of this. And I think where we're going at NORAD and Northcom, part of that is being able to integrate those data sets from across our interagency partners and our combatant commands through our Maven smart system visualization tool. That's what we're using. When we say Maven, we're talking about what we're using. There is a different project, Maven, that NGA is working. And I think that everything they're doing, it's all complementary, right? So you have the Project Maven things that are quickly identifying imagery and being able to tag and tell you this is what this image is showing. And then you have like our Maven tool that's going to bring that in, that helps enable that combined joint all domain command control, CJADC2, so that we can talk globally. And so as we get more data, and I fully believe we're just going to keep getting more data, we have to develop those tools. But to develop those AI ML tools, you have to have humans on the back end. You have to train the algorithms. You have to put some synthesis on it. I know at some point you get to a self-learning AI, perhaps, but I don't think we're quite there yet. We're still kind of in those stages of, hey, we just need help right now with being able to understand the data we do have, and can we synthesize it and get it in front of decision makers fast enough so that they can make some decision. So that's how we're using it. When I look at the other side and how, to be frank, I don't completely know everything that they're doing and how they're using it. I would say probably most of what I have seen from mostly the PRC, is this use of, or maybe even Russia, but it's what do they think about AI? How would they use AI? I think we're a little different in the sense that we are probably a more ethical society, and that we would use AI for those things I'm talking about is how do we bring things in and sift it, analyze it, and help the human in the loop. Some of the things I have read, at least about some of those societies, is especially the Chinese, is they might actually rely on the AI to make the decisions for them, especially in, modern warfare. And I think I, just recently saw the meeting between the president, Biden and President Xi, where they were talking about, hey, we don't want you to give your nuclear weapons over to the AI. I mean, so it is a concern of how do you employ it? It's not just how you're going to use it. But of course, they're going to use AI ML to do the same thing we'd like to do. They want, clearly China grabs, they extract a lot more data, from our clear defense contractors, other places where they're trying to fill their systems. So they're going to do the same thing, absolutely, and try to, get that, sift through that data, make use for it in their weapons programs. I don't want to say it becomes a battle of data in the competition space, but in a lot of ways it is.
Yeah, I know the great power competition is what it is, and that's certainly everyone's sort of striving for the same place. But to that end, keeping that data secure, how do you keep that stuff secure? How is Northcom and NORAD integrating those practices, processes?
So one of the things that we do, believe in and support is the zero trust architecture. Partially, that's just so our Canadian friends can also share the same data, and our other partners and allies. I mean, zero trust, a lot of people are like, oh, so you don't trust anybody. Like, I'm not smart enough to be able to explain exactly how the architecture works. All I know is it'll credential you, and basically, yes, you're supposed to be on the system or you're not. So some of that is us trying to be able to empower that global integration through zero trust with our partners and allies, which has security inherent to that. But that being said, you're still always looking for those constant. Do we have not just threats, coming from the outside? Are people? I mean, every day there are cyber attacks against us. Every single day. My boss, we'll talk about frequently. Probably just in the time we've been talking, there's been thousands of, port scans or intrusion attempts, that are being blocked by our cyber defense folks. So, we rely on cybercom, the cyber protection teams, to make sure that we're defended. And so I trust that they can do their job. But there's always more vulnerabilities that pop up every day with new software and things like that. So I just say it's a constant. We're trying to protect ourselves and then educate folks of, hey, don't click on emails. I mean, that are suspicious. I know it's so mundane, but it's amazing how many folks still today, you might get a random email and they'll want to go click on it. So, we'll run drills and things like that to see, hey, are people, are they setting themselves up that sets up an entire command for vulnerability? So it's always on our mind for sure.
Can you expand a little bit on the partnership and the collaboration that you do with your Canadian folks?
Absolutely. I'd love to, because I think it's one of those areas people don't, realize as much. When I talk about my Canadian partners, there's probably two different hats I'm wearing. If I'm talking about them in my Northcom hat, it's in a bilateral relationship, as in, hey, two countries talking to each other. When I'm talking in my NORAD hat, because I'm dual hatted, I'm now talking about my boss's boss, who's the Canadian, the chief of defense staff, so I actually have a Canadian chain of command as well. And we all do who wear the NORAD hat, also an American chain of command. But, and so that is a binational command, different than bilateral, and it's by treaty. And so it is just a constant, how do we advance both on, as I talked about, zero trust architecture, how can I share more with my Canadian NORAD, partners in the different regions and sectors that are defending North America, and how do we, I guess, work to expand our own knowledge base, the things that they're learning, and so besides just talking and having a good relationship, with my partners, it's we take trips up there, they take trips here, and then we figure out, hey, what else can we do? And it's really interesting. In Canada, the way NORAD is viewed is as another force in employer, if you will. It's looked at as a combatant command. Canada only has, now essentially the equivalent of 4 combatant commands. So NORAD would be one. The Canadian Special Operations Forces Command would be 2. The Canadian Joint Operations Command would be 3. And then you have their newest command, which is the Canadian Cyber Command, and that'd be 4. And I've met with the directors of Intel for all those, entities. And so same thing. It's that I have the binational relationships with them in my NORAD hat as maybe an equivalent command J2, but I still also have a bilateral relationship with them, as an American to a Canadian. So I got to remember which hat I'm wearing sometimes because you have different authorities. But by and large, again, team sport, can't defend North America without our Canadian partners.
Yeah, certainly the huge land border and Alaska and all that certainly is big.
Talking about building on that Canada part is the Arctic and the challenges and the opportunities that is going to bring now and into the future. That again, I think that's one area that we're going to have to continue to focus on, not just defense intelligence, but as a Department of Defense, as a whole. It's 50% of our NORAD area of responsibility. But when you look across the whole, there are 8 nations. Russia's one of those. The rest are European, but who have a vital interest, besides Canada, in the Arctic. And so with different the Northern Sea Route opening up between Russia and China, if you will, to maybe be able to move more oil down there. The Chinese moving more into researching the Arctic areas for, they'll say underwater research for mining potential or other things else. I mean, let's be honest. Everything that they're doing is dual use, right? So everything you need to operate a submarine in the Arctic, you need those understanding the bathymetry. You need to understand the temperature variance, things like that. So and the fact that they did a combined bomber patrol up there together, again, into our 8 is at Alaska. It just shows you the Arctic is going to become more contested, I think. And that's one place we really have to look. And again, to be able to do that, we need that domain awareness from the sea floor to space. And some of the things that we're doing and looking at that, not just that integration, but looking at some of those future capabilities like over-the-horizon radar, the integrated undersea surveillance system, other space cyber, capabilities, just as much that can bring in that domain awareness as possible is kind of what we're looking for here. But the Arctic is definitely one area that I think it's going to get a lot more attention as we move forward in the out years here.
Yeah, and it certainly speaks to the collaboration necessary for these kind of things. You've talked about, responsibilities and roles from places like Spacecom and,
Yes.
international partners and things like that. So that's certainly, I didn't even think about the Arctic, and that is now at the front of my mind.
I'm glad. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's cold. And, and that's, it's funny, we were talking before, but truly, I've been in some harsh environments. It is different in Scandinavia than it is in Alaska and Canada. It really is. And you would think it would be about the same. It's not. And you have to be able to organize, train, and equip forces for the Arctic. And to be able to do that is not easy. Things break and things get really cold and things don't work. And so it's just a different environment. And if people say, well, we've trained with Norway or Finland or Sweden or someone else like that, I'm like, yeah, and that's great. But I do, just my own experience of talking to, especially my Canadian partners, it's a lot tougher to do it out of the high north, if you will, than people may realize. And so that's just another aspect of that is how do we organize, train, and equip the right forces, the right intel sensors, that they're survivable and they bring us that domain awareness.
Yeah, the logistics of the tech up there, I'm sure is a whole different ball game. And I can't imagine that's something that's easy to do. We talk a lot about edge, getting information to the edge. Well, that's one way you talk about it. Absolutely. Well, Brigadier General Calabrese, thanks so much for doing this with us.
Oh, absolutely. It was my pleasure to be here, and thanks a lot. Great talking with you.
CyberCast, along with GovCast and HealthCast, is a production of GovCIO Media and Research. For more podcasts and to check out the other shows, head to govciomedia.com. Watch out for new episodes released every Tuesday and Wednesday across our shows. You can follow all of them in your favorite podcast platform, and if you like what you heard, make sure to let us know by leaving a review. And if you have any topics you think we should look into, contact us at newsletter@gcio.com.